Kayla King, and welcome back to my channel, or if you're new, welcome. It's been 1 week since I attended the Women's March in Buffalo, New York, and I'm excited to share that experience with you today in a story time. Before I talk about the actual event, I did just want to travel back in time a few weeks to the moment I heard about this phenomenal event. On September 14th, my sister sent me a link to the Women's March, and after looking at the information, I knew we absolutely needed to attend. However, when looking closer at the details of that event, I did realize it was scheduled for the same time as my cousin's wedding. Despite the challenge of having to navigate so many events in one day, we did decide ultimately that we would attend the march first and then head to the reception afterward. At this point, we didn't have all the logistical details thought out or planned, but we knew that we had a few weeks before the actual day to figure out where we would go, how we would get there, and to really get a game plan set in place. As someone incredibly passionate about women's rights and having the unique position of working on a project dedicated to womanhood, I knew it was going to be important for me to speak at this event. I registered for the event that night and emailed the organizer to volunteer as one of those speakers. At this time, I did consider reading a poem, thinking back to all of the words I'd already written and also the words that had yet to be written. After sending that email, I also realized I wanted to design some merch. While I had already launched a few pieces specifically inspired by the ELPIS pages, I went to work that night to create designs specifically inspired by the march. The days started to pass. I ordered my t-shirt, which I did discuss in my last Editor Diaries video, as it has one of my favorite quotes from Ruth Bader Ginsburg on the front, and on the back it has "bands off our bodies," which really became one of the most prominent slogans and chants that we performed during the march on Saturday, October 2nd. A few of the other designs I made incorporated that same slogan, "bands off our bodies," though one of my favorite t-shirts does have "of herself" on the front, inspired by Margaret Atwood's novel, The Handmaid's Tale. These are still available for purchase, and I'll leave the information in the description box below. As the day of the march neared, I was looking through my previously published poetry as well as some unfinished pieces that I had saved in Scrivener. I stumbled upon a poem that I wrote September 20th, 2020, entitled "All the Things You Could Miss at the End of This." It was written 2 days after Ruth Bader Ginsburg passed, and I remember feeling so many things after this event and needing to put it all down on paper. I was inspired by a Twitter thread in which someone was breaking down Jewish traditions. I was fascinated and proud as a woman for the legacy that Ruth would be leaving behind. However, I was also sad and scared at the prospect of what the world would look like now that Ruth was gone. That poem also goes on to explore a few key women in my life, but it all came back to Ruth, and I still specifically love these lines. "You don't know how to write this part, but you bellow the words of a prayer typed out to be mindful of character counts. May her memory be a revolution. The leaving remains in everything, every fact. This season must go. She is gone." And you cling to someone else's poiesis in regards to the pain of seeing empty places at the dinner table. They expound on Jewish traditions you commit to the page because you fear those too will disappear. She was held on earth until the end of this year because she was needed. It is how they speak of her passing on a holy day, effusing the sacred with beauty about the revolutionary ramification of womanhood, of truth, of her. Ultimately, this poem didn't feel quite right. I penned other bits and pieces in the hopes that I could create a new poem worthy of being read. I wrote, "When I was young, I was scared of being soft, and I said, yes, he's nice, though I was scared. And later, I couldn't walk to the car, and my hair was long, and I thought that was the problem." This all came from one of my most terrifying memories, in which I was harassed by a male employee and later questioned by the owner. He asked me if I had been flirting, if I had asked for that kind of attention. My hair was long then, and I was nice, maybe too nice. I also wrote, "I liked the weird women in Macbeth. I knew them for who they were. Poets with guts filled with feelings. They might have clasped car keys in fingers as a talisman. And I hold my palms to the women before, Circe, Hecate, Elpis." Another line played over and over in my mind, and I cried to my mother, telling her I didn't ask for this, and she explained I was born to hold a universe, but of which she was unclear. There were so many things to write or reread about womanhood, but none of them felt like enough. And so I moved on to the other preparations for the event. I designed 2 posters, one for myself and one for my sister, and I had them printed through FedEx. They looked absolutely beautiful. However, when I picked them up, I did realize they were a bit flimsy. I did have to get a little crafty, so I bought foam board from Michael's, used rubber cement to mount the posters onto the foam board, and I also bought handles to make it easier for our march at City Hall. I also created postcards with information about the ELPIS pages that I was planning to hand out once we arrived at the event. The funny thing is, once I stopped thinking about what I was going to put into my speech, the idea was already there. On September 28th, I couldn't keep the line, "half of a whole is still less than," from echoing in my mind. This is not entirely uncommon, as I am someone who hears thoughts as actual narration in my head. What can I say? My writerly brain is very persistent. I didn't think this line could be the opening, however, so I backtracked a little bit. I got to thinking about how much I struggled with math when I was in high school, middle school, elementary school. Whatever it may be, numbers and I did not get along, especially the idea of fractions. And I knew I had my beginning. And from there, my speech spilled out in a torrent. I knew the title, "Sometimes All We Have Is Hope," would be perfect. It was the catchphrase I was using throughout the ELPIS pages, and something that I thought on as a sort of mantra to get me through and remind me why I was so passionate about this project day in and day out. I finished my speech and I sent it to my friends. I practiced a few times and then recorded over voice memos. Even on the day of the event, I took my printed version outside to our backyard and I practiced over and over again, walking the steps of it into our basketball court and trying to project over the noise pollution outside. After all, it'd been quite some time since I spent my days as a theater kid. Once I felt like all of the practicing had been done, I went inside and got ready. I put on my Ruth Bader Ginsburg t-shirt, and then I promptly left the house to go get my hair done, because as I said, I was attending a wedding later that day. And when I came back, my sister arrived, we loaded up the posters, and my dad dropped us off downtown at Prospect Park so that we could begin the march. When we arrived, there were so many people already gathering, but my sister and I did take a few moments to snap some photos, and then I headed off to hand out my postcards. Everybody was so kind and generous, allowing me to give them that information. We passed so many people wearing purple, as this year's colors were purple and cream, and so many beautiful and creative posters that people would be carrying as we headed towards City Hall. I must say I'd planned to take more videos and photos than I actually ended up with, but I was drawn into the moment and I'm mostly left with memories now. Some of my favorite posters, however, that I did see were "Ruth Sent Us," "Without Hermione, Harry Would Have Died" in book 1, so true, and "We Are Not Ovary Acting." That one was great, I love puns. Before long, we were marching through the streets of Buffalo on our way to City Hall. We chanted "Bands Off Our Bodies," "Whose Streets, Our Streets," "Hell No, Roe Won't Go," and my personal favorite, "Who Sent Us? Ruth Sent Us." With each step of this march, I felt more empowered and heard, holding my poster high above my head for all the world to see. There were people there who'd taken part in countless marches before, and then there were other newbies like me, but together we all stood up and spoke out for one thing, and that's women's rights. Once we arrived at City Hall, my sister and I quickly made our way to the front as I knew I would be speaking. I didn't know when, but I also knew that I had a short time frame. We needed to leave at 3:30 to make it to the wedding on time. But in that time, we had the chance to listen to inspiring and wonderful women talk about women's rights. And then it was my turn to speak. I folded it in half to keep it from blowing free from my grip, as downtown Buffalo is notoriously windy. I took a deep breath and began. I suppose what I wasn't expecting were the cheers from the crowd. However, with this speech, I felt every word in my bones. I'm going to share that speech now, but just know that it will be published in the ELPIS pages when it comes out in December, and I can't wait to share it with all of you. Sometimes all we have is hope. I have never loved numbers, but rather words. And it didn't matter that countless men explained who I should be or how I should wear my hair, because my mother told me I could be anything, that I could do anything. And so I became a storyteller. Now I reach back through the generations of women who tackled life with ferocity. I am my mother's daughter. I'm a woman who never enjoyed numeric principles, but who understands that half of a whole is still less than. We women have the power to carry whole universes inside, and what we choose to do with that power should be entirely our own. So the frightful vengeance of geometry could haunt me if I let it. Instead, I focus on something more simplistic. They say 1 in 3 women will have an abortion in her lifetime. I've wept with such a trinity. I stand at the center of these kind and compassionate and resilient women who are able to make a choice for their bodies and their futures. They have carried whole mountains upon their shoulders, and if they were another Greek myth, perhaps they would be transformed into a man tasked with balancing the sky on his back. Men would call it a burden. As women, we call it so many other things, the vocabulary vast for what we must do to survive. To those of you who respond to the bravery and selflessness it takes to make these choices by musing women are only half the people they used to be, I say growth is constant. We are never the same person we were yesterday, and that's okay. Sometimes nostalgia may twist our memories, urging us only to recall the bright, glittering images of who we used to be. The real magic, however, is in who we become. That's the story worth telling. That's the choice women deserve. I stand here now with the stories of women, both from fiction and my life. To ELPIS and Circe and Hecate, to Tess and June and Leslie, to Buffy and Hermione, to Margaret and Sylvia, Octavia and Ruth, to Brenda and Michelle and Jill, to Christy and Tina and Summer, to Erin and Amanda, to Ellen, Gail and Barb. They constellate themselves in my universe, reminding me that independence is iconic. That no matter what a man tells me I should be or how I should wear my hair, I am my mother's daughter. And she reminds me these choices are no one's but my own. I choose independence. I choose strength. I choose hope. Thank you. And just like that, it was time to leave to prepare for another celebration. But I had the memories with me through a lengthy car ride, trying to recount as much as I could to family and friends once we arrived at the wedding. By this time, my mom had already shared the video, and it was so heartwarming to have all of these reactions from my friends and family, the people that I love most. As I continue to champion women and their rights, putting together this collective, which will support the Planned Parenthood Action Fund, offering a safe haven and a voice to self-identifying women to share their experiences about womanhood, I won't forget this day and everything it gave me and the nation. Just 3 days after a historic gathering in over 650 cities across the nation, U.S. Judge Pittman issued a stay of SB 8. Declaring that the court will not sanction one more day of this offensive deprivation of such an important right. I'm reminded that we all have the power to speak up and use our voices as the collective we to say we do not accept this. We deserve better. However, there is so much more work to be done, and I will continue to add my voice and my words to this fight for women's rights. I hope you enjoyed this storytime video with me. I'd like to thank everybody who showed up to help support women's rights throughout the nation on Saturday, October 2nd. I'd like to thank our organizers in Buffalo, New York, and I'd love to give a specific shout out to Anya Kester and Glenn Murray for providing some of these beautiful photos from the event. But I will also be including their socials in the description box below so you can check out their photography. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and remember, no matter where the day takes you, dream big.